Well, today we're going to continue our review of creating orthographic drawings. We'll do that for a couple more days. We're still going to look at creating auxiliary views here in the next class or two. Today, still making multi-view drawings, but this time throwing in some curved shapes for you. So we need to include center lines for our curved shapes. So the requirements on center lines, when we're talking about an English unit drawing, center lines should overlap 1/8 of an inch past the part. When we're talking about a metric drawing, it should go past 3 millimeters. So again, just depending on what type of drawing that you're working with. This one I think is an English unit drawing. So I'm going to start by setting my center layer current. And there is a center line tool that you can try. Sometimes it works great, sometimes it's not quite what I want, but it's on the Annotate tab. And then you have to click this. Let me get rid of my little magnifier here. You have to click the Dimensions drop down and you'll find the center line or center mark tool in here. Now that's driven by dimension style, whether it gives you a mark or the lines. So let's pick on this big circle and see. So that one I can see it went ahead and gave me what I wanted there, which was the full lines. Now, if I use that same tool on some smaller shapes, a lot of times it'll just give me the mark. That time it gave me the full center lines. But let me just give you a quick example here on a smaller circle. If I come in and try to set that with a center line, and then you can see it just does the little mark because there's not enough room to do the lines. So continuing on here, I'll put another little center line on this one. Sometimes things will look a little weird because what's happened is when you do the center mark tool, it actually does it as separate lines. So you can see that better over here. There's one dash for the middle, and then there's a line for the left side and a line for the right side. Now since I've got my center layer applied, it actually does the center marks in these lines too, which is a good thing. Over here you can see that they start overlapping with each other, and so then it's a little less clear what's going on here. So that can be cleaned up a little bit if you want. If I delete that one, you can see that you can work with this various different ways. I'll just move that over so that it's centered. So that would be acceptable. Another thing that would be acceptable is if you drew those in manually. So let me show you what that looks like. And I'll just ditch each of these real quick. So if I'm going to draw this manually, since these horizontal center lines all line up, I'm just going to do that with one line. So I will start my line, and I'm going to come 1/8 of an inch off of the side here. Again, since let me double check. Oh, you know what? This is a metric drawing. So I'm going to come off 3 millimeters. I'm going to change my snap settings to include quadrant so I can track off of this quadrant here. And I'll track over 3 millimeters. And then I can come over here to the end and track another 3 past there. Now, the thing about tracking those, I try to track this one and move over. It's still tracking for the first point. So I'm just going to go ahead and click to place the point there, and then come back and select it and grab the grip and move it over 3. So again, if I want to do the same thing up top, track up 3, and then snap it there, and then come back and bring it back down another 3. And then I can do the same thing for this shape to get the 2 centers. Now when I do it on this one, they aren't going to line up quite perfectly with these center lines, and that's okay. I'll give you another strategy. I like to offset. You guys who've had me before know I love the offset command. So I'm going to offset 3 millimeters and offset this arc up and this one up. And then that way now I can just snap onto these points and not have to do the whole tracking business to get my center marks in the right spot. So again, you can see those centers don't line up quite perfectly. When we did that by hand, we would take great steps to make sure that didn't happen. Here, that's acceptable. The company I work for, we actually went to a little more effort to get them to line up, but that'll be acceptable in here. So we got to show the center marks in here, and again, I'm all about offsets. So I'll offset this up and down, and then draw a center line from the midpoint here. We do another offset, and then I can track off of these guys and show my center marks. So line hierarchy, if you have a visible line and it lines up at the same spot with anything else, visible always shows. If you have a hidden line and it would run in the same place as a visible, you always show the visible. If it's hidden versus center, you always show the hidden. So I don't quite have an example here, but just know that if there should be if there's a hidden and a center in the same spot, you just show the hidden, since it's actually object related.
How far do you offset usually?
So if it's a metric drawing, 3 millimeters. If it's an English unit drawing, 1/8 of an inch, 0.125.
Okay.
Yes. And I got that on the slide. While you guys are working, I'll have this up on screen. So again, one more, I'll offset 3, and then it'll share the same center line since they line up perfectly there. Now occasionally, and I can't recall if you'll run into that on today's exercises, but occasionally you'll have the case where your center line will not actually show up. So I'll just give you an example here. I'm going to say this bottom piece is actually thinner. So this bottom piece is thinner, and when I offset the center line 3 millimeters each direction, the line just simply isn't long enough to show dashes. So here's how you fix that. One way that you could fix that is by changing your overall line type scale, which I wouldn't recommend, but I'll show you what it looks like. I'm going to do this by typing LTS for line type scale and pressing enter. And then in my command line, you can see it says enter the new line type scale. Currently it's 0.25. If I go to half that size, 0.125, then all my dashes are now half the size they used to be. So you can see I've got tinier dashes all across the drawing. I don't really want to do that though, because the line type scale is usually set up for the scale that you're going to print at, so it's usually an appropriate scale to begin with. Those of you that have had manual drafting, you know, you do like the 1/8 inch or 1/8 and 1/16 or 1/4 and 1/8. It's been so long when you're drawing those. I think it's 1/8 and 1/16 when you're drawing out your dashes. So instead, you could override just individual lines. So if I were to select these two lines and right-click and go to Properties, then over here in the Properties, among many other things, you're going to see line type scale of 1. Now, just to be clear, that's a scale factor times the original line type scale. So remember, my line type scale in my drawing was 0.25. This is just saying match what the drawing is. But I can go ahead and change this to half. And as you can see, it now resizes those so that they're half the size, but everything else is the standard size. So I know, at least for the company I used to work for, we did that a ton. We did, if they were center lines, we wanted to see the mark in there. So we'd change the properties of the line as needed in order to get those marks. So I'd like you to pay attention to that and make sure if it's a center line, you've actually got the little mark in there. So any questions at all on...
What was that box called that you pulled up?
Oh, this one? It's the properties. So we did that last semester, Weston, when we were inquiring about information and changing them. So you can get it. I'll show you all the different ways you can get it here real quick. You can, I think PR for properties works. Yep, PR for property works. You can also, for some reason mine's not floating like it normally does. There we go. CH for change properties works. Up here, oh, my screen looks different than yours because mine's not doing widescreen right now, so let me stretch this out. So you've got AutoCAD up in front of you, right? Yeah. Weston, this isn't going to stretch out apparently. Well, that stinks. But in your properties panel, you find your properties panel up there. Yeah. The bottom right corner that's pointing down and to the right, that opens it up too. And then the way I did it is with a right click. So if you select something, you can right click and choose properties. And that will come up then. So as usual in AutoCAD, several different ways to do the same thing. So what I'd like you guys to work on today, we're going to jump to chapter 8 since it's got some more curved features in it. The first one's metric, the second two are English. So remember, when you're doing metric, you've got to start with the HCC ISO template. And when you're doing English, start with the HCC ANSI template. And again, there's your overlaps. If it's an English unit, it's 1/8 of an inch. If it's a metric drawing, it's 3 millimeters. So let me know if you have any questions.